Okay, so we're not going to go through the whole rest of the parsha, but there's a couple verses I want to call out. So Genesis chapter 18, verse 12, it says, "Vatitzchak Sarah bekir ba lemor." Then Sarah, so this is after the beings are saying, she's going to be pregnant, all this stuff, right? So then Sarah laughed in her intestines, or inside of her, saying, "Acharei veloti hayta li adna vadoni zaken." Okay, so I'm sorry, I never heard Sarah talking. I just know she's got a girl voice. After, it will be that such, there will be for me adna. I'm going to have like this enjoyment after being deprived. Now there's going to be for me adna, like pleasure, presumably the pleasure of having a kid, right? By the way, this root is related to the Gan Eden, the garden of delights, the garden of pleasure, the way that we say heaven, right? Or Gan Eden. Gan Eden is actually the Aramaic. Vadoni zaken. Notice I made it big. But my husband, literally my Lord, is old. Right? Yeah, thanks for the verse. Dr. Vera put up the verse there from Jude, verse 6. Yes, very nice. Where the angels got convicted for what they did, for their bad behavior, and we're told that they are in chains of gloomy darkness. Thank you for that. And that is actually almost a direct quote from Enoch that Jude is taking there. And Dr. Vera says, does this mean that they assume that they transformed and possessed physical, biological bodies so they have sex? Look, this is how Enoch puts it, and Jude is quoting Enoch. So I'm just going along with the thought that Jude thought Enoch was okay to quote here, and the Enochian position was, that these angels were able to do that, just like they can eat in this example here with Avraham. But for those who find that theologically off-putting, you could think of them as possessing certain humans, maybe. They possessed them and they manipulated, which sperm would be used, and so 1 in 10 million, and that's how they ended up, making giants, right? By kind of genetic manipulation or something. There's other ways to think of this. You don't have to think that they really took on a physical body. I do. I think that's what happened. I think they did this thing, and But it could be something like possession, right? I mean, their offspring end up being the demons. And so, if demons can possess, then how much more so a fallen Ben Elohim, fallen son of God, fallen angelic power? Yeah, it's a nice question. But you understand my point, my line of thought is that since Jude is borrowing from Enoch, right, he obviously trusts Enoch to borrow from it, right? Then why not assume that other concepts in Enoch about the Nephilim are true as well, you see? Like, but maybe we can trust it more. Yes, it's not canon, right? It's not part of the Bible, but the Bible is quoting it, right? And not just quoting it like, it's quoting it for the purpose of instruction, right? And it almost seems like Jude is saying it's common knowledge, right? The way he speaks, the way the language is almost like, you guys know this, right? Beware, don't let it happen to you like what happened to the angels, right? Did not keep their own domain. That is, they didn't stay in the spiritual realm, but they wanted to cross over into... I think probably what happens is that when a spirit fully crosses over into this realm, they get a body. I think that's what happens. I could be wrong, Okay? So let's see, under certain circumstances, they can maybe communicate from the other realm, but when they actually come into this realm, right, then there's maybe a body involved. Okay, and so the Targum... Jerusalem Targum translates this very interestingly. It says, and Sarah derided in her heart, saying, after that I am old, is it possible to return to the days of my youth? Right, so they clarify what they were talking about here with the Edna, for me to have conception, and Avraham is old. Okay, now look, she's saying my husband is old. This is interesting. This is what I want you to pay attention to. Because look what comes in the next verse. Okay. Vayomer Adonai el Avraham. Then Adonai said to Avraham. So now Avraham speaking, right? We just saw what Sarah was thinking, right? What she said in her midst, what she's thinking. But now we get the report of what happened. This is Adonai speaking, Hashem speaking. Lama ze tzachaka Sarah lemor. Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Ha'af Vayera Eylayv va'ani zakanti? Is it true that I will give birth while I myself, this is an emphatic pronoun, am old? See, zakanti means I became old, right? Or I am old, statively. Ani, you don't need that. It's emphatic. So look, Hashem is misrepresenting what Sarah said. In the previous verse, she said, Adoni, my husband, Zaken, is old. But now she's saying, I myself. Again, it's emphatic. This is called an emphatic pronoun. Myself, okay? Meaning there's some emphasis here. I, myself, Zakanti. See the E at the end? This also means I, right? So you could think of this, and I have become old, right? She's saying two things. I have become old. Became, or am old. Or am old. You see what's happening here? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, has changed the quotation. He's softening a bit what Sarah said. She said, my husband's old. But Hashem is saying, she said, I am old. The Talmud Tractate Bava Metzia, page 87, teaches us that this verse indicates that the Holy One, blessed be He, did not repeat to Avraham that which Sarah actually said, that her husband is old. Why did God change the wording of her statement so that she was referring to herself? It's interesting, right? God is misrepresenting Sarah's words. This demonstrates to us a very important concept. The concept that we call shalom bayit, peace of the house. Peace of the house. Shalom bayit is a very highly held principle in Jewish culture, that peace in the house is more important than most other things. The Talmud continues to say that the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught shalom, peace, is of such great importance that even the Holy One, blessed be He, altered the truth for the sake of preserving peace, as it is stated. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, and my Lord is old? And it is written, and the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I certainly bear a child, and I am old? So you see? Hashem, for the sake of shalom bayit, He doesn't want for Abraham to be offended by Sarah's words, right? Like it's somehow his fault that they don't have kids, because he got so old. You understand the concept here, the principle? This is, again, halakhic exegesis. This is where we get rules on how to how to walk in our life by observing. In this case, the model person is not Avraham, right, or Sarah. The model of who we are observing is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. God Himself gives us the example. Okay, some comments. Tet says, because she is the one who will bear the child. Dr. Vera says, Sarah was actually... Okay, so this is the question. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But the perspective the sages are putting on it, that it's not really about that. The reason that her words are being misrepresented by God is so there will be peace in their house, right? We've seen what Sarah is capable of when she's really mad. Although there are good reasons for that too. Some of the Midrashim teach us that Yishmael actually, that he molested his younger brother, right? Later on, we have the whole metsacheyq is the word it uses in Hebrew, that he metsacheyq. This is the same word that's used when Jacob later, pardon me, when Yitzhak fondles his sister, right? His wife who he said is his sister. It's actually metsacheyq. It's the same word, right? So by Gezerah Shava, the sages understand this to mean that it can have a sexual connotation, right? Again, this is just a couple of midrashes have this happening. So, but it certainly gives us a reason for Sarah to be so furious to want to kick Ishmael out of the house. Okay. And Sarah laughed within herself. Okay, so there it is. Yeah. So preserving peace. So Ted says, oh, was it like she was mocking her husband's capability? Good note for wives. Yeah, possibly. He's an old guy. My husband's a geezer. What's, how am I going to get pregnant? So Shoshanah asks, what could be Hashem's reasons for withholding children from couples then? So we talked about this a little bit last time, I think. So it's a good question. So the rabbinical answer to this is because God, in those cases when he withholds conception from the women, he desired their intimate prayers. He desired the intimacy with them. And things might have been different if they already had 10 kids or whatever, right? So that by withholding, by causing the barrenness for a time, he got more of the attention from the women, right? He got the more intimacy from them, from these righteous ladies, from these tzedakot, that they would then spend more time in prayer, and they learned to be more pious, etc., these sorts of things, really hoping for a child. Dr. Vera says, Sarah was actually incapable of bearing a child. Avraham can still bear a child. Hashem is correcting Sarah. Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so just like we see, we've been talking about a little bit in the Nach group, how when the Messiah acts in the apostolic writings, usually his miraculous deeds serve more than one purpose, right? There's many things happening, right? He shuts up the critics, he restores the person, gives them a better life, he punishes the demon, right? Like in the case of casting the swine, we discussed this recently, right? He punishes the farmers who have swine in Israel, right, by destroying their livelihood. It's like, judgment is at hand. He makes the path by the graveyard safe, because we're told that the demonic possessed, that the demoniacs, that they would attack the people with extreme violence so that nobody could walk on that way. There's many things, when the Messiah acts, many things happen, right? He's solving many problems oftentimes at the same time, right? It's like a brilliant response to a situation. And so too, we would expect the same thing to be true with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So it could very well be for the sake of Shalom Bayit, right? As the Talmud comments here, or it could also be, so this is Rabbi Yishmael gets the credit, or it could also be like you're saying, it could also be he's correcting Sarah, right? Look, Avraham can have kids. We know it's not a biological issue with him. He's got Yishmael, right? And after Sarah, he has more kids, right, from his wife after Sarah, right? And so it could be, so it's got to be Sarah. So that makes sense. It could be that as well. Okay, someone writes me in private, so can we tolerate a lie for the sake of Shalom Bayit? To what extent can we tolerate lies? So the rabbinical teaching on this, the Musar for Shalom Bayit, is that certain white lies are okay, right? So, for example, or withholding information sometimes can be okay for the sake of Shalom Bayit, peace in the household, right? So this is not an excuse to just go off and lie about everything, right? But the idea is, one of the examples that's given is like, regarding food, right? Like some women are deeply affected if their cooking is rejected, right? All personalities are different, right? Depends on the person. And so like, if you know that someone is deeply affected by criticism and they ask you, how's the food? Then the man may say, great, right? He might give a white lie, when really when she turns around, he's giving it to the dog or something. I'm just kidding, but this would be an example of what's accepted. So a little white lie like that to preserve the peace, so the person doesn't feel terrible, right? Of course, there's limits to this. If the food is bad every day and the guy never tells her, hey, stop pouring all the salt in, then, he deserves what he gets, right? For not finding a way to approach that. Okay? Any other comments or questions? On unimportant matters, on fairly trivial matters. Right? Ted says we just bless the food and we elevate it to become satisfying to the soul. All right, there we go. Bless the food and a recipe falls from heaven, right? Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't think of a better example than, the food example is kind of the common one that's given. I heard Mizrahi in my head then giving the food example, right? That's what I was sharing that. If you've listened to any of his teachings on Shalom Bayit, right, he uses food as an example. He talks about this one rabbi who is his wife, his new wife, he just married, his new wife, she would make his tea for him in the mornings before he'd go to the yeshiva, and this is not Mizrahi, he's talking about somebody else. and someone fairly famous. I can't remember the source. And instead of sugar, she was putting salt in his tea. and the rabbi just kept saying, "Oh, it's great, it's great." And he would drink it all down, with the salt and everything. Yeah, and finally she realized, "Oh my gosh, I've been putting salt in this tea. Why did you tell me?" He's like, "Oh, look, you're my new wife. I don't want you to feel terrible about it." And, So anyway, that's just an example. Ted says, because I would always complain, and the prayer taught me. Remember the mannah that the Israelites complained about? Yes. It's kind of the ultimate complaint. God's giving you food and you're complaining about it, right? I think we all can work in that area of not complaining so much. I remember several years back there was a pastor that challenged his church to do like 30 days without complaining or something like that. It's really hard, especially if you're American. It's really hard, especially if you're American living in a third world country. It's super hard to not complain. But yeah, we got to be careful. If we're chronic complainers, it can take away from our gratitude. It can rob us of our gratitude, which in turn can rob us of our peace, right? And that's not a good thing. So this reminds me, this teaching here from the Talmud reminds me of the Besoret Mattityahu, chapter 5, verse 9, where the Messiah says, "Makarioi hoi areno poioi, hotialtoi huioi theu, theisontai." Ashrei is really the Hebrew word. Ashrei, like we have in Psalm 1. Ashrei ha'ish, blessed is the man, right? Lucky is the man, like happy is the man. Happy are the ones who are peace doers, is literally what it says in the Greek. Peace doers. But if we kind of pull this back to Hebrew, asa in Hebrew can be to do or to make, right? So usually it's translated peacemakers, but I like the idea of it being peace doer, right? If you think about that, there's big action involved. For these ones will be called sons of God. Isn't that interesting? That title. They'll be called B'nai Elohim, sons of God, the peace doers. Let me underline that. They'll be called Huioi Theu, sons of God. Isn't that something? Have you ever thought about that? What's it mean to be called sons of God? Those who are interested in preserving shalom bayit above other interests, other concerns, right? Those who are interested in helping to reconcile others even, right? And of course, I'm mentioning about between a husband and wife because what could be more important than the peace in the home between a husband and wife? Yes, other pieces are also important with our neighbors, with, Yeshua even makes the case with enemies. Well, yeah, the echroi in the Greek it says, which is enemies. But then the examples he gives are usually legal situations, right? Like someone is suing you, right? This kind of stuff. Then you want to be friendly with him. Yeah, Hashem. Okay, and then there's another saying from the Messiah that this Talmudic passage made me think about. This one is from Mattityahu, chapter 5, verses 41 and 42. He says, Kai hostis say, angarise million, ein, or hen, pardon me. So, if or when, the kai, it's probably like the vav in Hebrew, that's why I'm going to say when. Even though in Greek it's strictly but he's not speaking Greek, okay, guys? We know that Matthew was written in Hebrew. The early church fathers, there's several witnesses who saw the Hebrew scroll, and some of them make the claim that this predates the Greek, okay? So at least with Matthew, we know it was in Hebrew first. So if that's the case, a vav in Hebrew can mean when. So I'm going to go with when then someone like pushes you, compels you a mile, milion, hen, 1 mile, hupage met alturiduo, go along with him too. So here we have Yeshua teaching how to make peace even with people who are being problematic. When I read this part about being compelled, the angaruse, that being compelled to walk a mile, it reminds me of the fellow who had to carry Yeshua's cross, the execution stake. You remember? The Romans could just pick anybody out for a duty, and they had to help out in that case. And so he's saying, look, if one of these Romans, if somebody makes you walk a mile, you go with him too. So we really should exceed the expectations of what is expected from us. This can apply in the workplace, it can apply at home, it can apply in any of these places that we're really supposed to give more than what people expect, which really comes into, there's a nice musar about, it becomes an art form, how you can manage yourself and manage your promises, right? It's a good idea. It's really good idea, good practice. When people ask you if you can do something, if you can give money, if you can contribute your time, if you can whatever, X, Y, Z, it's a good practice. I know many of us, we want to please people right away, right? Many people, we just want to make them happy. And so we're tempted to say right away, yeah, I'll do that, or we can do all of this. It's better to put on the brakes and either say something like, I'll get back to you, let me think about it, and then don't leave them hanging, right? Or to minimize what you're offering. I'll have to consult this with my family, we'll see. For now, I can give you 1 hour a week or whatever. Or for now, I can give you, 10 pesos or whatever it is, right? And then make it your habit that you exceed the expectations. I think this is much better. Much better than saying, remember, we read from the Talmud that the wicked person promises much and does not even a little, whereas the righteous person promises little but does a much. And even here in the case where there's compulsion, I think this is derivative, what Yeshua is teaching, that this concept of doing more than what people expect, this then becomes a Kiddush Hashem, right? This is a sanctification of the name, is what it is. Because people will start to understand, those messianics, they really surprised me with how much they were willing to help, to do, to whatever. And even among one another, it's better for not just Shalom Bayit, but for the whole Shalom Kahila, the peace of the community. Okay? Any other comments or questions before we finish up? Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Mode'im anachnu lefanecha, ki haya shelanu hazman hazeh, ken yeh ratzon Adonai, ki bashavua hazot, ki yihyeh lanu ruach hakodesh shelcha Adonai, ki anachnu rotzeim lelmod tov ba'einecha, ve'anachnu rotzeim lalechet al derech hayashar. Ta'azerna otanu Adonai, ki anachnu chalim לעשות את הדברים האלה. לא לנו ולך יהיה כל הכבוד. בזכות ישוע המשיח. Okay, you guys have a great week. Shavuot Tov. Nice turnout today. Thanks. If any of you brought in.
Thank you, teacher.
You're very welcome. You guys have a good one. Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Toda.
Rabbi, thank you so much.
Toda.
Bevakasha. This is the end of our Shabbat Drash. Student editions may follow. Today's Drash was brought to you by the letter Sin. Make sure to remember it. Check it out. Down below we have complete indexed, time-encoded descriptions of the subjects in this Drash. If you want to hear another part again, just click on the subject and leave us a comment. If you leave us a comment, I will definitely reply back to you. May the Holy One, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bless you and your Kol Mishpacha.